You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another episode of Nostalgic Gaming Stories. It's been a minute since I've done one of these, so I thought it's about time I do another one. As the series title implies, these are stories of gaming that are nostalgic for me, who'da thunk it, but obviously also, by the title of this video, we're talking about cheat codes. Cheat codes are kind of a thing of the past now. Like, every now and then you'll get a game that has some of them, but you usually don't really get it anymore because everything's all focused on online play and multiplayer, or being super challenging and things like that. Now, the obvious argument one could make is, if you're gonna cheat, why play the game? But I think that's a stupid argument, because if the code's in the game, it's obviously meant to be used. That said, there are certainly advantages to playing a game without cheat codes, and a lot of games are much more fun without using them, but sometimes they add a little bit of extra spice and flavor, especially depending on what the cheats do. For instance, sometimes cheat codes give you secret unlockables that can only be obtained through said cheat codes. Let's use, for example, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker's Bad Fur Day has several hidden characters that are playable in the deathmatch mode, and you can only play by those characters by entering their cheat codes. I personally have all of the Conker cheat codes memorized, so I enter them all the time whenever I play multiplayer on Conker's Bad Fur Day. So for instance, let's say you want to play as Conker, or even Neo Conker in multiplayer. Well, you're going to need the codes for that. If you don't, you can't play as them. There's no way to unlock them permanently. You have to enter the codes every time. Same thing if you wanted to play as Greg, or the Squirrel Sergeant, or even the Teddy Sergeant, which was only used in that one scene in the turret, if I'm not mistaken. You can also play as the zombies and the villagers and all sorts of other stuff, right? So things like that I think are totally fun. I like little things you can do like that add a little extra thing you can do to the game with those cheat codes. I also often use the 50 lives cheat on some of the more frustrating sections in Conker, particularly like the beach section in War. That's one of the most frustrating parts, you know, the last part of the War chapter. Then there's other fun little cheat codes, like the ones on Halo 1, where you enter period fortune for your name, and this only works on the original Xbox version, mind you. But if you name your profile a period and then the word fortune, that will tell you a fortune, like a fortune cookie. And it's a fun little Easter egg you can do in the game. I used to start out all my Halo streams with it back when I was playing the original Xbox version. Then there's games like The Sims, which I almost exclusively play with cheat codes. Sometimes I'll play without, it just depends on what I'm doing. But sometimes it's more fun to just unlock everything at the start and build some really crazy shit with infinite money, and then load your game after you've done all that and play it normal. But sometimes it's fun to just kind of fuck around and just do all sorts of crazy shit in The Sims. Another game that I used cheat codes on a lot was the Incredible Hulk game on the original Xbox, the one that's just called Hulk. I do not play that game as the Green Hulk. I always exclusively play as the Gray Hulk in it, so I always make sure that I have that unlocked. Like, granted, on my original save, that's unlocked already, but I always make sure I play as the Gray Hulk, because I don't find the Green Hulk as fun, because he doesn't do the fun one-liners that the Gray Hulk does. That said, I've also, when I beat that game, I've never beat it fairly. I've always used the Wicked Punch cheat, which makes it so you kill everything in one hit. So that's a game I should probably try to play through fairly. I plan to maybe stream through it at some point. I know Anthony did a playthrough of it not that long ago. But I think you get the idea. I've had my fair share of experience with cheat codes. I used to use cheat codes on the Simpsons games back in the day on Road Rage and Hit and Run when I was a kid. But there's more to the cheat codes than just the codes themselves. There's a certain feel and sort of culture around them back in the day that's not really there anymore. You see, back in the day, before the internet was picking up as much as it did, we used to get all these cheat code books that they'd sell in stores, and sometimes they'd be wildly inaccurate. Sometimes they'd have codes that don't exist, or they'd get something in a code wrong. I don't think I ever bought one of them, but I used to go into Walmart and I'd just pick it up and read some for some of the games I had and try to do them when I got home. If I'm not mistaken, just a few years ago, I still saw some in there. I haven't checked to see if they still carry them. I don't think they do, but if they do, maybe I'll buy one just for the nostalgia's sake. Another thing you used to have to do is, because the internet used to be a lot slower back when we had dial-up, which is something I did have to deal with for a little while. I mean, I'm not that old, but I did still live through dial-up for a while. And then early DSL and stuff, you know, so things that weren't quite as fast as Wi-Fi is now. So the thing I used to do, especially since I didn't have a computer of my own, on my grandma's computer, or on my friend's computer, my mom's computer, whatever, I'd go on to CheatCC, which was the site I used primarily, which, if you don't know, that's short for Cheat Code Central. I'd go on there all the time, and then I'd print out a page of the cheat codes, or I'd write them down in a notebook. So that way I actually had a physical paper with the codes on it I could pull up as a reference at any time. I remember Dozermac had a bunch of, like, pages of cheat codes that he'd printed off that he just kept in a desk in his room. And I played games a lot in his room, back when we used to hang out when we were kids. And I'd use those for reference, because he had a bunch of them. He printed out a fuck ton of them. I remember, obviously, I've already talked about this on a previous episode of Nostalgic Gaming Stories, but Knights of the Old Republic, I used to do cheat codes on that all the time, too. The Galaxy Droid is more of a glitch, but it was still kind of, an exploit. And then I also did the cheat to turn Malik into a Twi'lek dancer rather than doing the final battle. But again, I've already talked about that in another episode. Obviously, another thing I briefly touched on in a previous episode is a lot of cheat code websites used to have fake cheats and, like, stuff that started urban legends, like for Jet Set Radio. There used to be, like, all these made-up characters that they claimed you could unlock that were just not in the game. Obviously, there's also stuff that's, like, cosmetic cheat codes. Like, on Perfect Dark, I always play it with the laptop gun, which, I mean, granted, that's not cosmetic, that's an extra weapon. But I also use the paintball mode and the big heads quite a bit. So I've had plenty of, like, fun cheat codes like that, too. Of course, the reason I had all those cheat codes unlocked is because I had a cartridge that I bought used that had save data on it, which is actually, I think, going to be the topic of a whole other episode of Nostalgic Gaming Stories later. Another thing is the Superjoy Power Player would let me cheat at Contra because it would let me use level select right from the start. Not my current one, that doesn't do that, but the old one we used to have did. There's also secret monkeys in Ape Escape 3 that you can only fight using cheat codes. The Peepatrons, for instance, and Spork and Shimmy. Also, another game that I always use cheat codes on is Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. I almost exclusively play as Scorpion in the story mode, hence why my playthrough's been with Scorpion rather than with Liu Kang or Kung Lao, because that's just a more fun playstyle. Not to mention there's all sorts of fun, goofy ones we do on LEGO Star Wars. I've been playing through LEGO Star Wars with a friend of mine. We haven't played it in a fat minute. We started playing it like a fucking year ago or something like that. Like, it was a while ago. And we started playing through it. And we're using cheat codes to have, like, little fake mustaches and the stud detector and all that. So, I mean, there's certain codes that I always use in games. So I do think that it's a fun thing to look back on. But again, these things aren't really much of a thing anymore. Nowadays, the closest thing you're going to usually get is mods people make. Another thing I used to have was the Game Shark. The Game Shark was a fun thing to cheat with on the Nintendo 64. It let you modify the game files that way. But the thing is the Game Shark only worked with certain games. Because there's like a ton of different versions of Game Sharks. I had 2 different versions when I was a kid. One of which worked with a few games, and another of which worked with a few other games, but there's certain games I can never get them to work with, even though there were Game Shark codes. Because there's some complicated stuff about key codes and stuff like that and certain things with Game Shark. But like Earthworm Jim 3D, I would cheat all the time using the Game Shark, which is why I got as far as I did in the game. I would make it so that I already was at, like, the max marble limit in a level, so I didn't actually have to go and collect them in Earthworm Jim 3D. I'd also use cheat codes in Dark Rift to have characters unlocked that you're not supposed to be able to play as, at least not from the start. But yeah, the Game Shark's similar to a Game Genie. I never used a Game Genie. I know Dozermac had one. I assume he probably used it when he was younger, but that was probably a little bit before my time. But anyway, cheat codes were fun. It's a part of gaming I don't really feel like is represented anymore. Again, a lot of people will be like, oh, that's because cheating is unsportsmanlike, and we're in a multiplayer, dominated force now. Or cheating takes away the challenge and stuff like that. And while I do think those are very valid points, I also think there is still a place for cheat codes in games, especially the more fun ones. And in all honesty, I don't have a problem with, like, invincibility cheats and all this other stuff, too, because I used to use cheats all the time, like I said. So I think that's a fun way to do it when you're younger, but I do think games tend to be more fun when you play them fairly later on. Anyway, that's all I have for this one, really. I hope you've enjoyed. This has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one.
What the fuck?